I need to be in the field. Ty needs to be in the field. Marcus needs to be in the field. We need to be in the field to stop this Titanic. Ugh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Another amazing graphic by the talented Colin Tooley. So you see, Joe Biden, obviously at the front of the Titanic. His buddy Joe Scarborough, who we're about to talk about, right behind him. Clueless Don Lemon, right on the boat. Got Mrs. Joe Scarborough, Meeker Brzezinski. Chuck Schumer. Titanic can't go down if Chuck's not on it. Got Nancy Pelosi, Tom Perez. They're all on the Titanic, and they're smiling as the boat approaches the iceberg. Iceberg, right ahead. That iceberg is 4 more years of Donald Trump and probably war with Iran. But what does the Democratic Party care? Remember, Bernie Sanders said they'd rather go down on the Titanic as long as they have first class. And I mean, I don't even know if Joe Biden is intentionally trying to lose, but the things he's doing this week, ugh. So after him talking about how great, how civil those times were working with those segregationists in the Senate, he stood by that comment. Of course he stood by it.
And then just moments ago, as we were coming to air, Biden shot back, telling CNN exclusively he had nothing to apologize for.
Corey should apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career. Period. Period. Period.
Not a racist bone in my body. I just referred to black people as Negroes back in the day. I just used to refer to the black man shouldn't get a head start in society. I pushed a racist crime bill. Iceberg. So, of course, Joe Biden, his first fundraiser was with a Comcast lobbyist, and Comcast owns MSNBC. So, of course, Joe Biden's buddy, Joe Scarborough, had to defend Joe Biden for talking about, I missed the civil days in the Senate when we could just be civil with those segregationists.
Criticize another Democrat. She said, celebration, you can't celebrate segregationists. Never. I didn't know he did. And here is Senator Kamala Harris and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio.
To coddle the reputations of segregationists, of people who, if they had their way, I would literally not be standing here as a member of the United States Senate, is, I think, it's misinformed and it's wrong.
Does he apologize for that?
He's going to have to make that decision. But, let's be very clear that the senators that he is speaking of with such adoration are individuals who made and built their reputation on segregation.
My wife is African American. We have 2 beautiful children. James Eastland literally thought my wife and I should not have the legal right to marry, that those children should not exist, that our children should not.
Yeah, pretty much. Let me do it first.
Let's do that.
First of all, Kamala, I love Kamala, but Joe Biden didn't coddle any segregationists in anything that he said. In fact, I think he called one of them one of the meanest people he ever met. If that's coddling, please stay away from me, Joe. Don't hug me. Don't coddle me. That's not coddling. Also, he didn't speak with adoration about desegregationists. His point was, it wouldn't have been very persuasive, would it, if he said, you know what, I have proven over the past 30 years I can work with Tom Carper and every member of the Delaware delegation. That's not the point. He picked the people who were the most repugnant to him, who he disagreed with the most. And he said, I could even work with him. Now, who was it that says, was it Rumsfeld that says, you fight on the battlefield with the enemy that's presented to you, something like that, right? Well, guess what? FDR. The brilliance of FDR is he could work with Yankees from New England, and he could work with segregationists and racists from the South. And you know what happened when FDR did that? He passed Social Security. He passed the New Deal. He saved this country, and he saved poor people like my parents. In the Deep South, he also saved black Americans in Chicago. FDR didn't sit there and go, you know what? I'm not going to deal with the racists in the South.
You gotta love Comcast Joe there, who he's talking about what is a persuasive argument. He thinks he's making a persuasive argument by quoting Donald Rumsfeld. Can you be more of a fucking asshole, Joe Scarborough? You think you're making a persuasive argument by quoting Donald Rumsfeld? So, okay, let's just talk common sense here, right? Joe Biden, his whole shtick, besides bending over and giving blowjobs to Wall Street donors, because that's what he's been doing at fundraisers. I'm sorry to be crude, but that's what he's been doing. He literally said to a bunch of Wall Street donors the other night, if I'm elected president, your standard of living will not fundamentally change. This is a quote. I don't know what you call that other than figuratively sexual favors. So Joe Biden's whole shtick is we got to get back to the good old days. Got to go back to the good old days where Democrats, patriotic Democrats and patriotic Republicans can just get together. It's a bipartisan deal. Break bread together. And do the work of the American people. Got to get back to those days so they could be bipartisan and make compromises like welfare reform, which destroyed black people and single mothers in particular, like the crime bill, which ushered in mass incarceration, like repealing Glass-Steagall, like the Patriot Act, like the bankruptcy bill, like extending the Bush tax cuts. Why can't we just get back to the good old days where the Democrats and the Republicans, they work together? If Joe Biden wants to run a campaign on, I'm the guy to bring back bipartisan stuff, which, by the way, I don't think the problem is Democrats and Republicans don't work together. I think the problem is they work together too much to pass regressive, terrible legislation that gives crumbs to you and I and gives hors d'oeuvres and champagne to the wealthy donors they're raising their money from. But let's say that's his thing. If you want to mention the good old days of civility, why didn't you mention Bob Dole, like working with Bob Dole in the 1990s? Or, I don't know, Newt Gingrich, or, I don't know, any Republican senators you could reference that aren't segregationists? If you want to talk about the civil days, weren't there some Republicans you could have, come up with? Maybe Bill Frist, that aren't raging segregationists? Why is it that your first thought was to reference to not only segregationists, but, beyond racist? Segregationists are obviously racist, but why did you first think to mention it was so civil working with those segregationists? Could have mentioned Bob Dole. Paul Ryan you could have mentioned. I don't know. Name your Republican from the 1980s and 90s who weren't avowed segregationists. But of course, Joe Scarborough works at NBC. Comcast owns NBC. And Joe Biden did his first fundraiser with Comcast. No conflict of interest. Does NBC ever disclose that their parent company is giving money to Joe Biden? Of course not. That would be ethics in the media, not allowed. Now let's see an MSNBC anchor literally yell at Bernie Sanders in defense of her boyfriend,
Senator,
Joe Biden.
You have joined Cory Booker in the last 24 hours, calling on Joe Biden to apologize for comments he made about working with segregationists. And it's the more people hear about it, Some are saying, well, he was applauding or celebrating that. That wasn't what Joe Biden was doing. Joe Biden was trying to make the point that bipartisanship is necessary. He's done so working with the deplorable of the deplorables. That's why he gave the example of the segregationists. So why is it that you believe he has to apologize?
Look, I think the media makes a bigger deal of it than it is.
So he doesn't have
All
to
that
apologize?
I said, no, yeah, I do, because it's one thing. Look, when you're in Congress, you work with everybody. I do. I think every member of the Senate, every member of the House works with people who have very, very different points of view. But I don't think you have to be touting personal relations with people who were very brutal segregationists.
But Senator, he wasn't touting
that's
relations.
My view on it.
His point
okay, ma'am, I'm sorry. If you disagree with me, that's fine. That's my view.
But haven't you, over a 4-decade career, had to align yourselves with people who don't share your views on things in order to advance your causes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just what I said. Absolutely. I have, and so has every other member of the Congress. But one doesn't really tout, one's personal relationships or make a virtue out of civility when it may be a necessity and not a virtue.
Understood. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Wow. Talk about unbiased, neutral, objective journalism coming out of NBC and MSNBC. And Bernie, can you be a little stronger? I mean, God, what does it take for Bernie Sanders to take off the gloves? I know some of you say that's why we like Bernie. Bernie, this is your last chance. You're not getting any younger. What Bernie should say is what I just said, frankly. Joe Biden, he's right. We need to be more civil with each other. And he could have referenced many Republicans who, he worked with in the Senate that were not proud segregationists. The issue is not talking about civility. The issue is referencing two segregationists to make a point about civility. Why is it that nobody understands this? But all I got to say is it's embarrassing at this point. Oh my God, if you think the media gave Donald Trump kid glove treatment, if you think the media gave Donald Trump all this free coverage and let him get away with murder, what they're doing with Joe Biden is an absolute disgrace. This man has said and done so many racist things, I'm losing track. Iceberg right ahead. And they're all just giggling like schoolgirls. Joe Scarborough, Don Lemon, Mika, Joe, Nancy, Tom. I think they know that the iceberg's ahead, but they don't care. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.